All right. So I was up late again. I should have been going to sleep, but I was on Reddit and I came across another Zelda thread I just have to talk about. And I know it's a bad habit. I'm trying not to get into it, but fan opinions make me want to give my opinion. So here I am. It was called Bring Back Linear Zelda Games. I'm talking about a mainstream installment on a console in the same vein as Twilight Princess and Ocarina of Time. Don't get me wrong, I love Breath of the Wild's formula, and I'm grateful it led to increased popularity of the franchise, but I can't be the only one that thinks a story-based, linear game that really takes advantage of the next-gen software for graphics would be awesome. I also think it's just inherently more difficult to have an impactful story in a non-linear format. While the developers did a decent job at that in Breath of the Wild and TOTK, I personally don't think those hold a candle to Twilight Princess and Ocarina of Time in the story department. For one, this main thing I think is kinda... I don't think you need a next-gen console to have a very impactful story. I think next-gen software, next-gen hardware works best whenever it is impacting the gameplay. So I think the console conversation doesn't really matter. We all do want the Switch 2, but it doesn't matter in the ideas with Zelda. In terms of story, Tears of the Kingdom and Breath of the Wild, I like that they are a closed story, that they are just for themselves, and that didn't really exist until Tears of the Kingdom came out. But once it did, and you got that understanding that, oh, everything for this story takes place around itself, that's fine. If you want to think about the greater timeline, whatever, but these games it doesn't matter for, and so you don't need to think about it. And I kind of like that. I think to say that they're lacking in the story department misses the point. And there are tons of threads on the Zelda Reddit about how it's the gameplay that impacts the story in these games. I don't know. It never bothered me. It never affected me. And when I go back and think on the story themselves, in both Breath of the Wild and Tears of the Kingdom, specifically Tears of the Kingdom, people are more offended by. It doesn't affect my enjoyment. I don't mind getting stories out of sequence, mostly because some of those stories I deliberately went out of the way. Some of those memories I deliberately went out of the way to get out of sequence. You kind of get a hint at like what's where and when to get it, but I often went off the beaten path and was like, I got this memory. I get this memory out of time. That's great. It didn't affect me because I felt accomplished. I felt accomplished having done that. I felt good as the player having gotten that memory out of sequence. And I've kind of like conquered the game. I've beaten the game. That's fun for me. Obviously, most of these people in this thread get their stories from what's being told to them. Like this guy here. They basically said Breath of the Wild and Tears of the Kingdom formula is here to stay. If that's the case, fine. I desperately need linear dungeons that you simply can't complete without certain storyline items. And with a world as big as they've made it, it's such a crying shame the dungeons are just so tiny, open, and lackluster. And instead, we've been supplemented with a billion shrines and hundreds of puzzles. The closest I felt to a dungeon was the castle in Breath of the Wild. Every temple should feel grandiose and feel that linear gap in the void that is the open world. To the last 2 points to that, I do agree with. I would love more grand and open dungeons, but I feel like he doesn't see it the same way that I do. I feel like him, given his first point of needing locked storyline items, is different. I like feeling like Indiana Jones when I play these games. I like feeling like I'm going to explore, I see a thing, or I'm searching for a specific item, and I'm only getting hints about it through NPC dialogue, and I'm going to search for that. And when I do, if I come across a dungeon or a cave that's windy and takes different types of puzzles or certain enemies to beat in order to progress, that would be a lot of fun. I do think there is an element to that with shrines, but more often than not, the items that you're getting hinted at in the overworld aren't that grand, aren't that interesting. But again, this guy doesn't see it the same way as I do. this guy would like dungeons that are locked behind the story, which I do think Tears of the Kingdom does, but I'm pretty sure in Breath of the Wild you can just like walk up to a divine beast. I haven't tried either of that in either game, but nonetheless, I think he wants those to be locked behind story progression, and I don't agree with that. With that being said, if there was a nice mixture of grand dungeons locked behind story and then other windier labyrinthy dungeons in the overworld that I could just wander into, that would be completely fine for me, and I would like that. And somebody did ask him, like, what do you think the benefit of linear dungeons are? Because he's the same. The main complaint on linear games is things are too locked. And his answer is, linear dungeons you can't complete without certain storyline items presents a challenge that says you're not ready for what's beyond this door gate obstacle, and gives a sense of achievement once you get the item and says, aha, now I can finally access XYZ. Every dungeon in Zelda series offers rooms which have clear goals: do the puzzle, kill the baddies, come back to the area at a different angle, you need a key, go find it. I like the approach as it presents a clear challenge, knowing the answer is usually in the room or somewhere nearby. I like the challenge knowing I'm making tangible progress and completing the rooms and fighting towards the end, opposed to solving things in open spaces and hoping it will all eventually adds up. Having it just be completely opened and ended in a field of do whatever you want to do in any order you want to do it is an approach to open for diehards of the Zelda series. It's like housing, sure, a complete closed-ended house with walled-in segment dorms, linear hallways. I'm not gonna lie, he kind of lost me. I want an open concept, not a 4-bedroom studio. What? I feel like that last analogy went against his point. But to what he had been saying, I don't like that. Like, I get what he's trying to say, but I liked making my own stories with Breath of the Wild and Tears of the Kingdom. The amount of times that I found that I just had items collected, the boomerangs, swords, shields, arrows, whatever it may be, I went about collected those, and then I hit a shrine and it was like, hey, we need you to do a thing. And I did maybe the same thing that it wanted to do. It was a nice challenge to try to find what was the intended path, but then it was also felt really good to like not have to do that. I don't necessarily like the examples he's giving where he specifically said the game's telling you you're not ready for that, when I maybe, like, how would the game know? I mean, obviously the game knows, but maybe I'm ready. Maybe there is a thing I can do that I can progress with. And in Breath of the Wild and Tears of the Kingdom, for the most part, there is, which I think is fun. It creates individual stories and makes me feel like I am an explorer. I am an adventurer. I am a hero. Linear stories don't do that for me as much. I actually agree with the top comment of the post the most. God, I remember being a Zelda fan in 2015, and you could not get away from people saying it was good but too linear. I'm very open-minded to Zelda experimentation because I expect that they took huge risks with Breath of the Wild and Tears of the Kingdom. When you are that ambitious with a video game, you are going to have a few flaws. You will create a more memorable experience. I agree with that. I feel like we've taken such a strong turn in recent years where open world feels too overwhelming to a lot of players, but I think that most people aren't complaining like this. Most people aren't looking for movies that you interact with. Most people see video games as something you have more control over than the story that it's trying to tell you. And I don't know, I like that with recent Zelda. I don't know, at some point with these people begging for a linear story, it just feels like, why don't you want to conquer something yourself? Why don't you want to go and create your own story? Why do you need a story told to you? I don't want to use the term sheeple, but